So today I'm in my BMW 5 Series G31. That's the current model of the 5 Series estate. Started production in 2017. And I've just had the front brake pad sensor throw up a warning on the dashboard. So I'm going to replace my brake pads. Now, the standard brake pads that BMW issue with these cars, they're good. This is a premium car, but they're not great. So I'm actually going to replace the standard BMW pads with the EBC green stuff pads, which do give superior performance without wearing down excessively quickly. So they're a really good compromise between much higher performance and decent longevity as well. Obviously, I'll be replacing the sensor as well with that. Also, just a quick note, this car came with 20-inch wheels, which I've downgraded to 18-inch wheels. That was the smallest I could go. I don't like large wheels at all. They give a very hard, very bumpy ride. So these are 18-inch wheels. And that's about it. So let's get cracking and get into it.
Okay, so obviously first thing you've got to do is jack the car up and put chocks behind the rear wheels. Now I should have used a little kind of rubber puck pad that sits on top of the jack and goes into that part there. You can get on Amazon. I actually didn't, and I paid the price afterwards. It's not on the video, but I actually damaged that plastic kind of moulded part that you're supposed to put the rubber pad into when you jack up. So I'll put the link to both in the description. Now you'll notice also I'm using the torque wrench, automatic torque wrench, to take the wood off, using a nylon coated 1/2 inch socket, which obviously stops you from scratching the wheel or damaging the wheel in any way while you're removing those bolts. Now, often forgotten, you need to remove this plastic panel and then remove the top of the brake fluid reservoir. Just before I do that, I'm just removing some leaves. Top tip, you often get leaves caught in this part of the car, and what tends to happen over time is they rot down as the moisture around them increases, it rains and so on, and then you get this horrible soggy mess at the bottom of your scuttle drain, and then it's a horrible pick of a job to weld afterwards. So do make it a habit to get rid of those. And finally, just putting some cloths around the brake fluid reservoir just to soak up the fluid if any comes out. First step then, once you're under the car, is to remove the actual sensor, the brake pad sensor, wear sensor, and you just got to get it out of these clips. Now these two clips here, it will come out, but the new one needed a little bit of help to get it in, so I just bent them out slightly later on. But it's just very simple and obvious to undo it. You just push these rubber bungs out from their restraints. And then there's a plastic box just above my hand there, and inside there is the final connection. And once you get inside, you just literally get a screwdriver, a little bit of pressure, and it pops straight off. Then obviously, just to make life easier for yourself, turn the steering wheel on full lock to give yourself the best access you can, as I've done there. And then you can get brake caliper separation tools. I actually had one next to me in the car in that black, red plastic blow moulded case. But actually, I found just using a screwdriver, just a flat bladed screwdriver, on brake calipers of this age work perfectly well. Honestly, they're old pads, doesn't matter what happens to them. And using a bit of brake cleaner there to aid the disassembly, get rid of any muck if it's possible. So yeah, no need for a brake caliper wind-back tool in my humble view. In order to remove the pins securing the top of the pads, you're going to need a parallel punch set. I did try using a screwdriver, cross-headed screwdriver, and you got no chance. You need the proper tools for this one. So that's a 3mm parallel punch there. It's the first time I've done it, so I was fairly careful with it, but honestly, it's just a case of whacking it straight out as far as it'll possibly go. And then there's a little trick to removing the last sort of 20% or so, which you'll see in a second. So they come out quite nicely. But then I found that they just caught a little bit, even when the parallel punch had done all it could do. So what I did was I got a flat bladed screwdriver and I pushed down on that kind of spring in the middle in between the pads, that large spring plate, just pushed it forwards, and that took the pressure off that pin, and then you can pull the pin out. and that made life so much easier. So it came out fine after that. And you can't see it at the moment, but in a moment you'll see on the right hand side of the pin is a kind of like a circlip, but it's similar but slightly larger, and that acts as an interference fit when you hammer it back in. Really though, you should replace these when you're doing the brakes. You should replace both the pins and the spring clip as well, so I'll put links to those in the description. Now you'll notice the left hand pad moves quite freely, but the right hand pad does not, and the reason for that is BMW in their wisdom used some kind of adhesive or gel or silicone or something like that to actually hold the pad onto the pistons. I'm not quite sure why, but really a flat-bladed screwdriver with a cloth was how I managed to get it loose, and it just takes a fair amount of elbow grease and trying, and eventually it will come free. But you've got to keep trying with that cloth, and eventually the seal is broken, and it looks like it has been just there, but actually it needs a little bit more. And yeah, the seal's just between those pistons and the pad there. So yeah, a little bit more encouragement, and the pad's come free. And you can see that spring clip in the middle there. Really should replace that, and also the pins, the securing pins. And that's me just giving it a little bit more encouragement on the right hand side, and that's properly free now, and the whole lot comes out. So yeah, that spring clip and the two pins really should be replaced, but I did not. I actually recycled mine. And you can see this pad sensor there worn down. So now I'm just kind of retracting the pistons on the left hand side of the caliper with my fingers, and you can pull them both in quite easily. The ones on the right I didn't find I could do with my fingers. In fact, what I did was use the cloth and two flat-bladed screwdrivers at the same time. And by doing that, I push the pistons back, and obviously that then pushes the fluid back up into the reservoir. And this is the point where you're grateful that you took the lid off the reservoir and put cloths around it, because if you didn't, you'll find this part pretty much impossible, because you're effectively compressing the air that's still in the tank, if there is any, above the brake fluid. Right, so now just using a nylon brush, giving it a thorough clean, and once I've done that, to get the worst of it off, I use these kind of abrasive pads, which are kind of like Scotch Light pads, as they're usually called, and I'm just using these to just clean up all the exposed metal remaining within the caliper. Just get it all as perfect as possible before putting the new pads in. Just using a bit of brake cleaner spray there just to remove any last sediment, and the cloth to wipe it away. And that is all set and ready for the new pads. Now the new pads actually have that black plate on the rear of them. That is to prevent brake squeal. So EBC actually say you must not use copper grease on the rear of their pads, because that pad is there, that plate is there, if you like, to prevent that. And the copper grease will interfere with its operation. You can also see they're the same shape as the old ones. Okay, so I've just had the brake parts in this ultrasonic cleaner, just cleaning for the last 20 minutes. I've set it to 70 degrees, it'll go up to 80, but that seemed like a reasonably high temperature, so I'll put it at 70. Put it on for 20 minutes. When you put it on, it makes this noise. You fill it up with this ultrasonic cleaner stuff, which you dilute with water, and I live in a hard water area, so I've been extra careful and added filtered water. And as you can see in there, it's taken off a lot of that dirt off of those various brake parts. Here we go, let's see how they've come out. Okay, so not perfect, I have to say. Not perfect, but an awful lot better than they were. Yeah, we give them. So just inspecting the calipers prior to putting the new pads in, and I think I've got the pistons on the right hand side pushed all the way back. You can't push both the right and the left back if you're using this method. If you use a wind back tool, obviously you can, because it will apply pressure to all four pistons at the same time. Now, just applying a bit of copper grease, and BMW say you should put it on these kind of exposed metal surfaces, so it's where there's no paint. However, you should not put it on the pistons, the brake pistons themselves at all. So there's a bit of copper grease going on, and right hand one I think is what I put on first. It's got some chamfered edges to make it a little bit easier, but it did need a little bit of persuasion with a hammer to get it all the way in.
And obviously it's a new pad, so it might be a little close.
Yeah, so a bit of encouragement by hand, but like I say, it got to a point it just needed a little tap with the hammer. And notice I'm not pushing it all the way in, I'm actually leaving it slightly proud, and that's because once I've got both pads in, the that plate, that kind of spring plate, needs to go in, and then the pins, the retaining pins, need to go in, and it's really important that you don't push it in too far, or that whole process won't work properly. So leave it slightly proud, about ½ an inch or so. Just pulling the pistons back on the left hand side now, because obviously I've done the right, the initial fitting of the right. It does take a few goes, but you do get there.
Okay, so I'll do the same on these as well. As you can see, they're tapered on the edge to aid installation. No, they go in a bit.
Okay, and that second pad is in now, so the same depth, just seems slightly proud. And now the friction plate. Now with this spring plate, sorry, not friction plate, notice that the curvatures are positive, so they're convex, not concave, which is kind of the opposite of what you expect, but that is what they are. And then you can push it in a bit further now that plate's in, and it will get retained by the top of the pads themselves. Here's the first of the pins, putting a bit of copper grease on just to aid it on its way in, and just to make sure that it's well set.
Possible from that angle. So you got
just push it in there by hand, and now just get just making sure that the pads just line up perfectly, ready for it to go in. So just making a tiny adjustment with a flat bladed screwdriver there to the right hand pad, and once that's aligned, it's fine to just push in by hand right up until it gets to the other end. And just for that last little bit, I just needed to use a screwdriver on the friction plate there, just to screwdriver on the end of the pin itself, just to line it up with the receiving hole, if that makes sense. It wasn't quite lined up. The various elements it encountered along the route through the caliper pushed it out slightly. So in a moment you'll see me do that. Here's the second pin going in, same deal, bit of copper grease.
A little bit of persuasion needed to line up.
And in it goes.
Just gently tap that one in.
And now just tapping in, sorry about the poor camera work here, just tapping in with a hammer. Obviously you can get it fairly close with a hammer, but you won't want to risk damaging your caliper, so for the last final taps you're going to want a 6mm parallel punch. But you see what I was saying about the top pin, just needed a little bit of relief with a flat bladed screwdriver there, and then tap it in with a hammer. And I'm probably going a bit close to the caliper there. So a 6mm parallel punch is what you need, and that'll do the final few millimeters or so of getting that caliper in, of getting that pin in. Sorry.
Okay.
And now all that's left to do is to fit the brake pad sensor. Now this will go two ways round. You want to make sure the notch is facing outward towards the brake disc. So it goes on the right hand pad, and the notch needs to face towards the brake disc, because that's the bit that gets worn down. That's the bit that will, the resistance will change as it wears down, which will alert the car's computer that the pads need replacing, and also incremental variance along the wear journey as well. So initially you can offer it up by hand, but then I found that although you'd think a pair of long-nosed pliers would be the best tool to use, actually a flat-bladed screwdriver was ideal, and it just popped it on. So I'm struggling there with the pliers. I struggled for quite a while. But yeah, flat-bladed screwdriver and just a thump on the back of that, a couple of thumps, and it went in quite nicely. So yeah, there it goes. Okay, so now that the brake pad wear sensor is in, it's time to route the wire back around the various cable guides and clips. So there's one there which the rubber just pushes straight into, and then there's these two metal ones, and I just found the cable was a bit too chunky to go under those metal ones, so I just used a flat bladed screwdriver to just open them up slightly, get the cable under, and then used a pair of long nose pliers to close them back up again.
Get it in the other one, same again. Just open it up slightly.
Sorry for the light obscuring the camera there, but hopefully you get the idea. And then another rubber into a clip, just pushes in. Just resistance fit. One more, and then above that, that one there is a little box where all the connectors go. It's fairly obvious how you clip it all back together and close the cover on the box. Just crimping those off a bit. Okay, so now that once you've done both sides, obviously time to then replace the lid on the brake fluid reservoir, and then this lid here on the scuttle drain there. It's a bit easier than I made it look there. And finally, to put the wheel on, I decided to use some nice chrome bolts, just smarten the wheel up. It's the sort of thing that if you do it, you really notice it, really makes a difference. If you don't do it, you don't notice it, if that makes sense. So it really does smarten the car up quite nicely. And I got these off eBay. Just remember though that these wheels have 5 bolts, and the kits off eBay have 4 bolts, so you will need an extra kit. And getting the wheel back on the car, you'll notice there is no convenient lip on the hub like there is with many other cars. So I'm holding this in place with my ankles, and it's quite convenient actually, just set like that and just screw it in there with the torque wrench. Hope this helps. This has been how to replace the brake pads on your BMW G31. Please do consider subscribing. I'll be releasing more videos in the future.